Hello and welcome to my first impressions of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. This was actually somewhat of a request. I remember in my Charlotte first impressions video, one of my subscribers asked me what I thought of this show, and at the time, I hadn't seen it. And the reason for that is because I don't really like long-running shonen. I find many of them to be unnecessarily slow. I don't like the idea of going through 500 episodes just to get to a satisfying ending. And I'm not really a big fan of action, so the battle scenes usually don't do it for me either. However, I was willing to wipe all that away and go into this with an open mind because even in genres I generally don't like, there are always exceptions. The story follows Jonathan Joestar, a rich young man who lives in 19th century England. His life changes drastically when his father adopts Dio, another young man who has recently become an orphan. Dio has insidious plans to take over the Joestar household, which involve using a mysterious mask. Being that this was a shonen anime, I was expecting a really slow start, but I was almost immediately drawn in as the first scene is some guy laughing hysterically at this really brutal carriage crash. Even though anime tends to usually be more violent than Western cartoons, I was surprised at how gruesome and dark this was. The setting was also really dark and it's filled with horrible people, especially when it comes to the main villain. From all that I've read, Dio was built up to be one of the most vile villains ever. And after seeing this, I have to agree. You can tell that somebody's rotten to the core when in one of their first scenes, they end up kicking a dog in the face. It's easier to see how he became this way though, since he was abused heavily throughout his childhood. I think the writer knew exactly what they were doing. They gave Dio every single personality trait necessary in order to make him an amazing antagonist. Unfortunately, I didn't find JoJo anywhere near as interesting. He seemed like your standard cookie-cutter good guy, but in the end, it didn't really matter. Dio was such a bastard that I ended up cheering for him anyway. Dio tries to destroy JoJo's life. He turns his father and everyone else in town against him. Being that I was bullied a lot in high school, I can identify with the loneliness and anger that JoJo was feeling. You have everybody telling you that they hate you, but you can't really do anything about it because you're completely outnumbered. It makes you feel completely worthless. And then Erina came into the picture and my immediate thought was, oh god, what is Dio gonna do to her? What he ended up doing wasn't anywhere near as bad as what I was thinking, but it was still pretty screwed up. And all of this happens in episode 1. It was amazing and I was hoping it could keep it up in episode 2, but then a problem arose. The character designs are flat out weird. They've got these tiny little heads that go onto these bulging necks and onto their massive bodies. They look like professional bodybuilders, which isn't natural at all. The original manga was made back in the 80s, so this art style is understandable, but it was still very off-putting at first. In the grand scheme of things though, I can usually overlook minor gripes like this as long as the story is good enough. And it totally was. JoJo and Dio's rivalry remained interesting and it perfectly set up the start of an epic adventure. The last thing I'm going to discuss is the fight scenes. As I mentioned before, I'm usually not into these and there was one fight scene that was kinda dull, but most of them were great, and that was because they were mostly between JoJo and Dio. I wanted to see Dio get his ass beat so bad that I found myself getting into the action where I normally don't think I would have. I don't really know how far I'm going to go with JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, but for now, it's a lot of fun and hopefully this can be one of those shonens that I actually end up liking. So anyway, thank you very much to everybody who watched this video. If you have any feedback, feel free to leave a comment, and if you like this video and want to see more, feel free to subscribe as well. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.